All right. So today we are lucky to have two people here to talk about working with universities. And some of you are actually at a university, so it'll make for a good conversation, I think. I was going to ask you, what do you think the most important factor is when it comes to sustaining a program? Just keep that in your head as a question. Consider what you think is the most important factor, because Scott is going to tie sustainability to collaborating with IHEs. Just, spoiler alert. And then Sarah from OSAP is going to talk about working with IHEs and share some ideas and resources for you. And then at the end, we're going to ask you to have 3 big ideas, 2 questions you still have, and 1 action you want to take. And you're going to choose one of those things to add to the chat. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that that was coming. So last time we met, we had Cedar share with us, Lindsay Hayes from the Cedar Center, and they are the TA center that works with universities, SEAs, school districts to think about the teacher preparation and supports in a state, certification standards, licensure, how teachers are being prepared, etc. So they talked about resources, supports, and so you can listen to the recording if you weren't there last month. But we're continuing on with the conversation this month with somebody who is in a state, Nebraska, Scott Ekman, and thinking about how to work with universities to more fully implement and to sustain his Nebraska's program. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
All right, thanks. Let me get my one. Okay, everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I will tell you a couple of things. So I am relatively new in this position. Nebraska has been fortunate to be able to utilize the SPDIG grant a lot in the past, mainly to lead our work around positive behavioral interventions and support. And so we're kind of in a transition where we're actually just starting a new grant cycle, actually in October. In the previous one of the goals that was set within that grant was building partnerships, collaborations with local IHEs. And we've kind of layered onto that a little bit, and it's kind of starting to grow. By no means are we doing anything like amazing, and most likely it's going to be similar to what you're doing, but we just thought we'd kind of check or kind of let you know kind of the way we've been going about it. Like Dr. Coffey said, I also thought about it in terms of sustainability, because I think a lot of the work that we're doing in collaborating with our local universities really lends itself towards specifically LEAs sustaining their efforts, whether through the SPDIG grant or after SPDIG grant or any other type of short-term funding. So I kind of took it and made it a little bit more in terms of thinking about it from a sustainability standpoint. So kind of similar to Dr. Coffey's opening question, I thought we'd start by kind of thinking about what actions do you believe have supported kind of the sustainability either of your efforts at the state level or within LEAs that you serve, the efforts that they provide or that they do that really have lent itself to sustaining whatever it is the focus is in those districts to sustain long term. So we thought we'd use a Jamboard to kind of do that. So there's 2 options for you to use. I don't know if you can click on the link from the slide. Otherwise, there's a QR code that you can use your phone. And basically, I will
actually, and
yeah.
Scott, I can go ahead and take, I can get that link from your slides and add it for people too. Because I was trying to do it on my phone, but it wasn't
not as great. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't easy.
Oops. Okay, so we're going to jump over to our Jamboard. Does everybody see the Jamboard?
And actually, you know what? I don't have the, Kelsey, I don't know if you're able to get the link.
Yeah, I just pasted it in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Kelsey. So if you have used Jamboard before, but basically what we're looking at is how do we sustain our efforts? So you would just add a sticky note on the left there, the fourth option. And you could say, I'll say something like strong district leadership is a factor that really has helped support that. And we already got, oh, and I said strong, yeah. Starting every meeting with data, absolutely. Yes, and then celebrating wins. Whole school or district, yep, for sure. We're gonna talk about that a little bit. Building capacity of district leaders and MTS in rural areas, especially, for sure. Practitioners working together using a protocol, train the trainer programs, evaluating the work and why it's working. Absolutely. Communication of the what, why, and how. For sure. Yep, ongoing communication. Creating buy-in. Using the use of evidence-based practices, have effective coaching. Hiring smart people. Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say, it's like hire the right people and then get out of their way. Ongoing PD and peer networks. Yep, we are. Yeah. So you guys are all over this because there's a lot of the things that I've been thinking about and kind of thinking about the way we're doing some stuff in Nebraska. So that's super exciting. So continue to add to that if you'd like, but just from a time standpoint, we'll keep going. But thank you. Okay, back to this. Everybody can see the slides again. Great, hopefully. So it's really interesting. I will just give you a really quick little backstory. So I recently completed my dissertation, actually within the topic of sustaining PBIS, specifically in districts who received a different grant, the School Climate Transformation Grant. And part of my work and through this, every time that I thought about this work, I came back to this quote. And little did I know that this quote actually came from Dr. Coffey back when as she was completing a lot of her work around the area of sustainability. But I really do think it's really impactful of where, when we think about education and what happens, and we, happen to have like this idea of initiatives or innovations that are introduced and really excited, possibly through a grant, but then they're abandoned later to make room for the next shiny new initiative and so forth, and kind of getting into kind of initiative fatigue where we're just over and over kind of thinking about different cycles. So again, I am very, very, I feel very fortunate to be able to talk and work with Dr. Coffey on this, because again, it was something that really stood out to me. So within Nebraska, for our fatigue goals, again, like I mentioned, the majority of it is focused around the implementation of PBIS, or positive behavioral interventions and support, as a multi-tiered system of support for behavior. Our goals are to increase the access to professional learning opportunities for Nebraska schools and districts, and provide kind of tailored implementation and coaching support to those districts that will help build specifically district leadership teams' capacity and increase that sustainability. And then obviously to do that, we have to increase the capacity of our state and district personnel to train on implementation of evidence-based practices, which is kind of where we're going to get started with thinking about how we work with universities and colleges, and then increase educator awareness of inclusive practices for students with disabilities. So within this is just kind of, again, thinking about how we best support districts in doing this. Someone mentioned in the Jamboard around coaching. Obviously, that's a huge element to this, but then how do we make sure that our coaches or trainers at the state level have that access or that content knowledge and expertise? And again, I think that's kind of where one of our beginning thoughts about how do we partner with our experts. I'll give you a little also backstory, again, specifically to PBIS, is we obviously work with the National Technical Assistance Center, and that's broken up regionally. So our partner is the University of Missouri and Dr. Tim Lewis, and they've been an extremely a benefit to us, but also recognizing that we need to be able to utilize our partnerships within Nebraska. And I think that's, again, one of our big things is how do we make sure that we do that, because we have experts, obviously we have a wide range of universities in Nebraska and some expertise there to utilize. Another thing I want to mention is the kind of the evolution of our supports, specifically through the State Personnel Development Grant. I mentioned that a long history of this grant has been used specifically around PBIS. However, we are really trying to shift our focus. In previous years, a lot of our support was provided to individual school buildings. And what we're recognizing is that that is not necessarily sustainable, given maybe a small number of state leaders or coaches or whatever the role is. So really shifting our support to the district, or in Nebraska, it's called educational service units. Shifting our support to that district leadership to really then build their capacity to support the sustained use of PBIS within their school buildings. And really one of those things that we made sure that we did was integrate our work within PBIS as a multi-tiered system within this overall organizational structure of Nebraska MTSS, which has been really beneficial, because unfortunately before they were viewed as kind of two separate entities, and we know that that's not accurate. So just a little data, again, kind of to the point of it, is we continue to see the expansion of schools implementing PBIS. So we're now over 30% of our schools in Nebraska implementing PBIS, which is exciting for me, but it's also, areas to grow. But recognizing that when we think about 1 in every 3 schools in Nebraska implementing PBIS, again, not sustainable for us to be able to really provide that individual coaching. So shifting that focus to the districts, but then also thinking, how do we utilize kind of an all hands on deck approach with university partners? So we kind of mentioned sustainability. So there's a lot of research around sustaining efforts for any initiative, but specifically with PBIS. I mentioned Dr. Coffey's work before, but also Dr. McIntosh and Rob Horner and Dr. George Sagai found things such as effectiveness, which was basically the idea of the fidelity of our implementation leads to desired outcomes, and that was resident in or shown in the Jamboard that you guys selected or put down. Also efficiency, so kind of what you guys talked about with creating buy-in and making sure that people recognize that the effort that we put in is getting the results that we want. And then priority, which is thinking about the visibility and importance of the initiative, looking at data, really developing leadership, and then using that data for continuous regeneration. Also, other studies, again, talked about the focus around district ownership to support sustainability, and then the access to external expertise. And that's going to be an area that we're going to we focus on in Nebraska, was providing access to university partners, but then also providing access to pre-service teachers to the experts within our state MTSS PBIS organization. And then lastly, thinking about it through the lens of communities of practice, which you guys are well aware of, since we're in one right now, is the importance of how we utilize communities of practice to support this work. So I mentioned district leadership. I won't go too far into this, but this is kind of our, we utilize the PBIS blueprint to really, again, thinking about how do we structure our district and ESU leadership through that leadership team, which again, you guys kind of mentioned in the Jamboard, to eventually get to that point where we have these local implementation demonstration sites to support the work widespread. And then the next piece was about providing access to external expertise. So there's a few different ways that we do this, specifically with our collaboration with our university partners. So the first and foremost is our partnership with the University of Nebraska with our overall organization of Nebraska MTSS. So a few different ways that happens is the university is very supportive of us within our communication. So they have helped build our Nebraska MTSS website that provides a lot of different resources for school districts, including a program comparison tool that allows them to kind of look for some possible strategies within areas of reading and math and behavior. So Nebraska has been really a great partner with us within just that idea of developing and providing resources to school districts.
Scott, can I ask you a question about that? Because
Sure.
I haven't had a chance to explore. When you say program comparison tool, are you saying what are the features of different curricula and evidence-based practices?
Yeah. So what schools can do is they can go in and look at it from, like I said, specifically like reading, and then if they wanted to look specifically for like secondary level, it will provide just a brief overview of it, and it'll also mention if there's evidence behind that practice.
Great. And have you all had any, just out of curiosity, have you had any pushback about that?
Not really. It's just, again, I think it's not necessarily it's more just to evaluate just, hey, is this something that you've heard of? Or, another thing would be is like if some district is like, hey, I heard about this strategy, or excuse me, or this curriculum, do you know anything about it? And then some of the Nebraska partners can at least provide a little bit of evidence or to see if there's anything behind that.
Okay. And just to remind folks too, in case, just make sure everyone's aware of it, the National Center on Intensive Intervention also has tools charts that get into like screening tools and that kind of thing and talk about the features of them. And so there's also
much, and those are much more robust. This is very surface level, kind of like, hey, this is maybe a starting place that they know of, and then we can get more. Yeah.
And I'm going to put the link to that in the chat for everyone. Thanks, Scott.
Yep. Okay, and then additional providing access to external expertise. We collaborate with specifically University of Nebraska, University of Nebraska Omaha, and the University of Nebraska Kearney to provide professional learning opportunities. Those have varied around areas such as multi-tiered systems of support, specific interventions such as teachers and parents as partners, functional behavioral assessment and behavior intervention plans, etc. What is really important with this is especially our partnerships with folks such as UNK, which is more towards the western part of the state. If you know Nebraska, we're very, very urban with Lincoln and Omaha in the eastern part of the state. As you get farther west, it becomes more rural. Kearney is a little bit bigger, but making sure that we have access, or we're providing equitable access to training opportunities. That's been a huge thing, is being able to partner with our universities like at Kearney. And
could you say a word about teachers and parents as partners?
So that is basically, so I don't know a ton about it. So Dr. Amanda Whitty from the University of Nebraska is one of the lead researchers in that strategy. But basically, it seems what I would simplify it as is developing a behavior intervention plan with parent input and provide strategies at home. So at tier 3, basically. And then providing external expertise specifically around data and continuous regeneration. Our partner and evaluation partner with this PDIG is through the University of Nebraska Medical Center. So they support us in not only doing some facilitation of things such as tiered fidelity inventory and staff perceptual evaluations, but then also helping us analyze that data to then, review our supports and pivot based on data. And then I mentioned communities of practice. So one, not unique, but one I think really beneficial thing that we've been doing in Nebraska is we've developed a Nebraska PBIS network. And this basically provides an opportunity for district educational service unit and some university leaders to collaborate around effective practices within PBIS. So we established this group in 2014, and we meet quarterly to kind of we have an agenda similar to what you guys we're doing today. What is exciting about this is, and I think this is the hard part, I think, when really trying to build those partnerships, is finding the right people. So recognizing back in 2015-ish and stuff like that, there was the first person that we recognized was a gentleman named Dr. Reese Peterson from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, who's done a lot of work around, before he retired, around restraint and seclusion. And it was really kind of by chance that we connected, but really talking to him and having him join this network was really beneficial. But I think it wouldn't have happened if we didn't purposely kind of ask people to join. So talking with Dr. Peterson, who then, hey, you should have this person from Doane University. This would be a really good person to join. But having that vehicle of our network meeting really allows for multiple conversations to be had between, say, district leadership and university partners, and talking about what the needs are and what we see is happening and what we could provide. So part of that then has kind of trickled into those initial contacts, getting us into our working with pre-service educators. So we have had the opportunity to be able to present to pre-service general education, special education, pre-service clinicians, so psych, social workers, and counselors, and then also current teachers who are now looking to become leaders or administrators in their districts. So we've done multiple presentations within, say, PBIS or classroom practices, thinking about function, disproportionality, et cetera, with multiple universities across Nebraska. And we're really excited that we're just starting to dip our toe into collaboration with one university around course development. They are working on a certification within more intensive behavioral support. So being able to support schools with that, and reached out to us to say, hey, what would this look like or what it could be? So we're in the process of doing that. So we're super excited about that. Oh, Dr. Coffey, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. And you're welcome to call me Jennifer, just so you know. Nope. So at University of Oregon, one of the places PBIS started, maybe the main place. Yep. For years, they were trying to get the general education courses to cover the material you're talking about right now, the content you're talking about right now. For years, this is George Sagaya, Rob Horner, and not having any success. So if anyone ever feels bad about what they're able to work with the universities to do, or work across your university to do, just remember, and I'm guessing it's happened by now, although I don't really know.
Well, and I will be honest, I will say that when we look at these, that's the especially in terms of, say, maybe like explicitly getting content within courses, general education is going to be harder. It seems to happen easier within, say, special education and so forth. But how do we really get into the general ed content? I think that's always going to be the struggle.
Yeah.
So next steps. So really, we truly believe that our network is a vehicle that we could use to really kind of build and continue to build and sustain those partnerships. So we're hoping to continue to expand those membership, especially since within around COVID, we switched completely over to virtual, and actually that helps to get more people involved. And then continue to promote, like I said, those collaborative partnerships. Also continue to develop in collaboration with our partners, additional professional learning opportunities, and then enhance those partnerships to integrate PBIS, MTSS content within curriculum, including hopefully more course developments, and using that data to then pivot our supports and do what have you. So again, I know that that's nothing, probably anything new that you guys aren't doing, but we do feel good about the partnerships that we're starting to develop, and we do have a pretty good way of thinking about how that could look in the future. So I guess I would want to ask you, as again part of this community of practice, and would love to learn from you, how you go about building partnerships within universities in your state. So we're going to end my time, at least together, by going back to our Jamboard. And if you go to it, and then if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, you just have to use that little arrow on the top.
Yep, arrow on the top there to go to the next one. What else? I'm sure, again, that you've done just as much and more and different things. What else have you done to collaborate with our local IHEs?
And while folks are thinking about that, I did want to ask you a question, Scott. What do you think your university partners see as the benefit to working with your program?
I'm hoping, and I believe they think, or they see it as recognizing that we bring a practitioner type of view. So obviously many of us have worked in school districts and in schools, and also provide a lot of the on the ground coaching support. So we have a sense of kind of that, again, that practitioner view. And I think that just helps, like we see, or we also talk to, we talk to building principals all the time, and we talk to, teachers and so forth, and like recognize what do we need. We also talk a lot about like things specifically in the PBIS realm, things such as our discipline data, which just shows kind of, some of the needs that we might need as educators. I mentioned specifically around disproportionality. We recognize in Nebraska that we have some students that are disproportionately disciplined, specifically with out of school suspension. So what can we do to do that? And if we can build teachers' understanding of things such as, I'll say, for like example, explicit or implicit bias, and how that might change our decision making, if we can catch them even before they walk into a classroom, I think that's going to be super impactful.
Right. I see Kate has her hand up.
I am so
Collaborative quilting, Kate. Sorry.
Collaborative quilter. I apologize. I'm really struggling with the tool, and I can't get it to run on my computer, so I can't utilize it. And user operator error on that.
Please share.
But I was thinking about in New York State, and I apologize, I wasn't on the meeting when Cedar came and discussed, but we're using in New York State our collaboration with Cedar around our MTSSI initiative. And that has been a very interesting journey for us, in that the gap between the SEA and our local IHE teacher prep programs. And then when we infused this MTSS conversation and looking at teacher prep and so forth, and then the implementation of MTSS through the SEA lens or the SPIDIG, it has been a very kind of wild and woolly conversation between the SEA and the IHEs. And I was just wondering if you had developed strategies or ways to traverse those gaps, because it's really interesting.
What I'm just curious, what are the gaps or the differences in how they talk about it and you talk about it?
I think that in New York State, there is another element that is a tension point that has nothing to do with the conversation on MTSS. And that is our teacher shortage is resulting, is kind of driving, we're doing some changes in special education teacher certification, which is changing IHE coursework for teacher prep programs at the same time, unbeknownst, like that, totally separate, but hitting at the same time. And so talking about teacher prep programs, particularly gen ed teacher prep programs, would be hoping to do kind of an item analysis to determine what elements of MTSS are incorporated into their teacher prep programs, has become even more difficult to discuss as they are revamping their syllabi based on changes in certification and so forth. And the stressors they have in terms of the ground they need to cover within those syllabi in the short amount of hours has really been challenging.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I don't think I have an answer to you. One thing that we're trying to do, and I don't, it's whether it's working really well or not. We provide through our state kind of, we provide trainings and what have you, specifically around like, what do we mean? Because I do think honestly that there's still misconceptions around what do we mean when we talk about MTSS and PBIS and the organizational frameworks that they are. So when we have opportunities, we'll invite connections that we've made to say, hey, why don't you come to this, not only to provide, any type of expertise you have, but even just say, just to make sure that our communication is consistent as well. But that doesn't happen regularly, I guess, you know what I mean? I mean, it all depends on like, if we have connections already, that I think it makes it a lot easier, like just from a, for like a collegial standpoint. But you're right. I mean, and we're dealing with some different, or in terms of teacher prep programs and requirements and all that stuff too. But that's really hard. I remember I had a meeting with I don't even remember the title, but he was like the head of Gen Ed at UNL, at the University of Nebraska, and it was really good. And we had some really exciting things to think about, specifically with like student teachers, because they're student teacher program, and it just kind of fizzled. And I feel like, man, I should have really pushed that a lot more, but I didn't. But I think I need to get back to that, because I do think, especially from the gen ed standpoint, we need to get better at that. I didn't answer your question. I'm just rambling. I'm sorry.
I want to jump in because I want to talk about that a little more. So I may not have an answer, but I do have some questions for you all. So I'm going to let you wrap up, Scott, with collaborations with local universities. Yep. And you sort of set me up perfectly for where I wanted to go next. So
well, I'm glad to do that. Yeah, absolutely. If you guys can see on the screen, but I'm kind of excited to hear more. So hopefully I can get some contact information. But I think about like higher education consortium. I'm curious of what that looks like in Montana, and micro-credentialing. That was something that we've talked about too, definitely in Nebraska, and I'm really intrigued by that. And then how does that, you know, and then even someone mentioned buying out university professor contracts. That's really exciting to me too, because like that's one of the things that we talked about a lot in Nebraska is, again, we have expertise in our universities, but we're not specific to PBIS. We're not like Missouri that has that really strong connection with University of Missouri, or Florida PBIS has a really strong connection with University of Florida or South Florida. We don't necessarily have that. So it's how do we build that, I think, is the thing. But again, I don't know if I have answers. So I'm sorry, I took over more of my time, but thank you so much. Again, I'd love to chat and connect more, because I think this is super exciting, but I will stop talking and let Sarah go.
So Scott, where did you get your doctorate? It looks like you said you're new to
Yes, within the past few months, Doane University I got from.
at Doane. I regret.
Yep.
Oh wow, this is like crazy. I think it
It
was meant to
is.
be. So I'm a Doane alum, and Roger Hughes was one of my best friends when I was a student there. Oh my gosh, and now he's
Okay.
president. So crazy things happen.
Mm.
I'll tell you those stories sometime in private. I got my degree at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, like I said, and that's where I got my doctoral degree.
Okay.
I work with Missouri, who's here today, and with Nebraska. We haven't had a chance to get to know each other well. I've been working more directly with Amy, so looking forward to that. Before I have connections to all of you, so I haven't been to Montana recently, but I do have worked with Montana actually, and I've worked with New York schools, so really happy to see this group. I wanted to mention, so the other thing about me is I'm a school psychologist by training, and specifically I'm a faculty member. So I came to the position I'm in now at the Department of Ed, in part because of my academic journey. I got my doctoral degree at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln in school psychology, and went to the University of Rhode Island, like I said, then to the University of Cincinnati for 15 years or so. And then a family move brought me here to DC. And when I was looking for a job in DC, I thought, well, who do I know? I know the Department of Ed because I've had grants from them. I used to work on a grant out of the Ohio State Department of Ed, which was actually was their SPDIG. I didn't know that. I just knew that they hired me to do whatever I was doing, right? But as I looked a little more closely, it was their SPDIG grant. I also worked with bullying prevention. So I worked with mental health kind of things. And so PBIS, MTSS, sort of those were my worlds. And I had funding, taught classes, did all of that there. And then when I came here, I'm like, oh, Jennifer, I met Jennifer actually at some MTSS kind of meeting, and Renee Bradley at some PBIS kind of meeting. So the connection sort of naturally brought us to where we are here. When I was at the University of Cincinnati, I was a new hire, assistant professor at the time. And the dean brought me in and said, look, our teachers are graduating and they're getting out to schools and they don't really know what to do. I mean, they know how to teach reading, they know how to teach math, but they don't know what to do if a kid comes to school hungry. And what are they supposed to do if like they won't sit still and listen? Like they don't just sit in their desk quietly and look at the teacher longingly and learn reading. It's like teachers don't know how to manage the class, right? So we started teaching a class for all teachers. It was required for all teachers, early intervention, general ed, special ed. And it was basically MTSS, PBIS, collaborative problem solving, a lot of things that we would all be familiar with. I remember this one student who complained like this was ridiculous. Why did he have to take this class? Like it was required and he could not see the relevance. And did the work, did whatever, but man, complained. And then in, I don't know, finished his coursework a year or so later, was interviewing for jobs. And he came back to me and said, Dr. Allen, you're not going to believe this, but they wanted to know what I knew about collaborative problem solving. I mean, they sort of brought it up. It's like, you're a classroom teacher. What are you going to do? And he's like, I talked about all that stuff. Like, I'm so sorry. You were right. Right? Teachers need to know it, but it's not really part of the regular ed curriculum. I tell you that story because like teachers, it was an exception that it was part of the curriculum. It was because of a special effort that that particular dean made, that all teachers were learning the content, because otherwise it really wasn't part of the content. The other story I wanted to tell you was like from one of our last, I just want to kick off here. So at our very last in-person state leadership grant, where state directors come, it's the Mtss side of the house. There was a panel, the keynote spoke. There was a panel of state directors from all over the country. And one of them, with his opening remarks in front of like hundreds of people, said, and I quote, as soon as after we hire them, we teach them everything they need to know. I'm like, oh, like, you know, that's not the message we really want to put forward. So I'm coming as a faculty member who now works, you know, has worked with state departments in LEAs, now at the department. And what I wanted to say, I want to leave you with this message is, we teach them everything they need to know after we hire them. It's like, no. So this discussion is about who's teaching them this stuff in personnel prep. Who's teaching this to general ed teachers? Who's teaching it to special ed teachers? This is required in school psychology programs. It's required in speech and language programs. It's required in like administrator programs, right? So my question to you all is, who's teaching this in your states? Today, we're talking about MTSS, but you also have evidence-based practices that are specific to your programs. So I'm curious, and I'm just going to pause. Who's teaching that in Missouri? Who's teaching that in Nebraska? Scott talked a little bit. Who's teaching that in New York? Who's teaching MTSS in New York? Montana? Kevin, do you know? Tell me, because people have different relationships with their universities, but I wanted this to be a discussion. I don't have slides today for you, and I don't have anything.
And Kevin, you're muted, just so you know.
I'm on the faculty at a university.
So where are you teaching it?
Um,
Remind me what university. I know you introduced.
I'm at the university at Albany State University of New York, SUNY Albany.
Great. So where are you teaching it?
I'm in the School of Education, Department of Division of Special Education. And my background and interest is in kids with emotional behavior disorders. So I come at multi-tiered systems of support through tier 3.
Who's teaching it in general?
I can only speak. I mean, I have lots of thoughts on state education agencies' ability to shape what pre-service teacher prep programs focus on in their curriculum and what they're up against. I completely agree. I understand. Right, because I'm inside one. Yeah, I understand. In this case, my relationship with Kate and the state is we're curriculum writers for MTSS is one of the things we do. And I utilize the exact same curriculum or something very similar to it in my coursework. So our students are certainly, our special ed master students are certainly coming out with a full exposure to RTI, PBIS, and the braiding of them into MTSS, database decision-making, teaming. So I'm curious, like if I were to ask you, I put this in the, I'm happy to hear that. And I think that's why you're here. And that's why New York is doing well with this program, is that you're teaching in professional development some of the same concepts that are being taught in higher ed. I remember George Sagai, I always enjoy working with him, Rob Horner, they're great, Tim in Missouri. I remember George saying one time, I apply MTSS, like that framework, to my whole life. And I think of that too. Like, so if we're thinking of applying MTSS to professional development, the question I would ask you is, what do all teachers need to know? What do all providers need to know? So let's just talk about certificated staff today.
database decision-making, Kevin, that's something we would want all teachers and providers to know. Anybody? Mark, I'm going to come to you in a minute. What are some other concepts you want all teachers to know? It'll be a fun exercise for us to think about and come back next month, right?
I think the hardest thing we ask our students to do, some people would think, my expertise is with students with intensive challenging behavior. And like people are like, oh, those students, they're toxic and noxious. I can't imagine having to do that. But I think the hardest thing, and then other people think, oh, those students who are non-communicative because they're on the autism spectrum. But I think the hardest thing we ask our students to learn how to do is to differentiate instruction, to use data to differentiate instruction, to really fulfill that very simple relationship between instruction and assessment.
So those are skills that,
to progress
that some people
in a
need to
meaningful
know,
way.
right? So maybe those are skills that some people need to know, or maybe a few people need to know how to do that really, really well. But a classroom teacher needs to know that we recognize students as individuals. We think it's important that families know their kids well and need to be part of it. Maybe they all need to know something about classroom management, how to interact with kids. They need to know, but then at tier 2, some people need to know more. So what do the school psychologists need to know? What do the classroom teachers need to know? What do the principals need to know? They all need to know things, but not exactly the same thing, right? The principal doesn't necessarily, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a principal. So do I need to know how to collect data in the same way and do classroom observations in the same way that a classroom teacher needs to know, or how to graph the data, or like who needs to know that? Somebody needs to know, but everybody's not going to know that in quite the same way. And what do a few people need to know really, really well? That's people like Kevin, who's teaching this to other people. Maybe it's the students that Kevin has, right? But if you think of the elements of MTSS, or you identify the evidence-based practices that you're trying to promote through MTSS, I challenge you to go back to your team and think about it in those ways. What does everybody need to know? What do some people need to know? And who are those different groups? And what do a few people need to know really, really well? I know we probably are ending in a minute. Are we ending, or can you stay for a minute? People have other meetings. Mark had his hand up, and maybe, was it Tammy? I missed somebody. You guys have put a lot of stuff in the chat too.
And I was just going to share for who provides the training. I would say I can only know what's in my zone of control as far as what we at the State Education Agency provides, but I do know through our higher education consortium that was shared on the note board that we do presentations to MTSS to our university faculty on kind of a rotating basis, and we talk about evidence-based practices or a lot of those content and topics with our IHEs, but really, unless there's changes in accreditation or things which are really complicated, they generally have that control over their content curriculum. But we do know some of our professors that we partner with are teaching MTSS, but generally our school, what we're hearing from schools is that they want us as the state education agency to train their existing teachers, new teachers, more experienced teachers, that it's coming from us for professional development and our regional partners.
Good to know. Thank you. Mark, did you want to say, or maybe you're...
Yeah, I could just real quickly. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, just real quickly, I would say that I'm getting really excited because we had this conversation today, and I saw Gwen nodding a lot because I'm blowing up Gwen's email with emails that I'm sending all along this conversation because it's so important with the work we're working with our SEA, our state advisory panel for special education right now, and that group is longing for some adjustments to the educator prep piece. And we're lucky enough to have some really talented folks that are a part of that SEEP, our panel, if you will, that make up that group. But we're finding that, yes, the state is asking for, or our LEAs are asking for that support from us, but they're also asking from the folks in educator prep. And so like I said, I've blown up Gwen's email with, we need to look at this, we need to talk to this person, we need to talk to that person, and they're right across the way. And we have, Tim here in Missouri, but yet he's only really one university. And we have lots of universities that have educator prep programs that don't all, even if they're part of the University of Missouri system. He's a Columbia MU guy, and he's not the other areas. So we're working to address that. So it's exciting to hear other folks and what they.
I think one place to start might be just a list of who are the universities in your state, and then who do we know? So Scott was talking about partnerships and getting to know people and building relationships. You talked a little bit about partnerships. I really love that idea. I think, like, what's a list of all the universities in the state which have teacher prep programs, which have special ed in addition, and then related services, because those are really essential, teacher administrator prep programs. And who do we know there? The one thing I've asked my states to do an inventory of the universities in their state and who's teaching the practices they're talking about. So maybe it's breaking MTSS into the little pieces, and you're not going to get a whole course on it. But in course, like 300, 302, sophomores hear about graphing data, or they learn how to look at a graph, or they think about parent relationships, or, so sort of breaking it down into the component pieces. And I really, really want to encourage you to think of related services. School nurses, no PBIS. It depends where they went to school, right? It's not about the title, it's about the training. So, sometimes there's really great partners that are not coming from the places you would expect. And it has to go beyond special ed. I've encouraged states to have a convening of OSEP investments. So who in your state has OSEP funding? And what are they doing? So, in Nebraska, we have a number of personnel prep grants at the universities, and they're all teaching stuff sort of like this, not in quite, well, hopefully it's in the same way, but not to quite the same audiences. But who has funding from OSEP? And if they do, they're all talking about MTSS.
Yeah.
And
which
how can
would
they
be
work?
a
I know
great
we got to quit. Can I
concept
come
to-
back another day? I have more
Yes,
to
you
say.
can.
Yeah.
Yes, you're part of the
I'm
group.
sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention tomorrow the states, small population states are meeting. So you're all welcome to join us for that. We can send you information if you'd like to be part of that.
Yeah, just email me. I'll put my email in the chat right now. We'll help you with that. So good to see everyone. Thank you so much, Scott. It was great to get to know you.
It was
and
wonderful.
Get to know
Thank you.
Nebraska's work. Thank you, Sarah, for getting us thinking. Sarah poses the best questions. She's the best question asker I know. And it's just good to see everyone and learn a little bit more about you. So have a good afternoon, and we will see you in 2 months for this group, and I'm sure before then for other groups.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.